The United States makes all kinds of claims about China. Many of them are pure propaganda. In this episode, we talk to Dana Showtyme Burton, who has lived in China for 25 years, to get his take on what life in China is really like. We'll discuss this and more on this week's China Report. Welcome to the China Report, made in collaboration with Pivot to Peace. Every week, we will be helping you sort through all the propaganda with an independent view of the country we are told to hate, but know so little about. I'm your host, KJ Noh. These are this week's headlines. China reduces carbon emissions by 2.7%, also reducing global carbon emissions. China's carbon dioxide emissions fell by 2.7% in the first half of 2025, approximately 134 megatons, while U.S. and European emissions increased 4.2% and 4.6% respectively, according to Carbon Monitor. Total emissions, global emissions, were up 0.7%. Rob Jackson, an Earth system scientist, said China and the United States are on different trajectories now. China may have already reached peak carbon dioxide emissions and is certainly moving towards global sustainable energy generation. China's solar energy capacity increased 45% compared to the first half of 2024, and is now over 1 terawatts, about 8 times that of the United States. Chinese universities encourage the student use of artificial intelligence. Top universities in China encouraging students to use and take advantage of AI, unlike universities in the US. According to a survey by the Micos Institute, the use of generative AI on Chinese campuses is nearly universal. Chinese classrooms are teaching AI as a skill to be mastered, rather than a threat to academic integrity. In the words of one professor, it can be an instructor, brainstorm partner, secretary, and devil's advocate. MIT Technology Review surveyed AI at the 46 top Chinese universities and found that almost all of them have literacy or interdisciplinary AI classes, many of them mandatory. The Chinese Ministry of Education has called for sweeping AI plus education aimed at cultivating critical digital literacy and real-world AI skills at all education levels. The Beijing government has mandated AI education at all levels, starting with kindergarten. The U.S. uses new hypersonic weapons in Talisman Sabre exercise. Talisman Sabre 2025, the large-scale war rehearsals for war against China held in Australia, saw the debut of several new and advanced weapon systems. These included the U.S. Army's long-range hypersonic weapon known as Dark Eagle and the mid-range capacity missile system capable of firing the SM-6 or Tomahawk missiles. The Australian Army's modular robotic vehicle with remote weapon stations and first-person view drones was also tested. Additionally, the interoperability of the Precision Strike missile and Type 12 anti-ship missiles was also tested. The Tactical Aviation Ground Refueling System was used to refuel helicopters. Australia is a key force projection platform in the US's plans for war against China, and these exercises signal granular and detailed preparation in these plans for war. China builds breakthrough quantum computing array. Chinese researchers have designed an AI system that is capable of arranging more than 2024 rubidium atoms, each serving as a qubit, into perfect patterns in a mere 60 thousandths of a second. This is considered a milestone in quantum computing. In neutral atom-based quantum computers, the atoms are manipulated by laser beams which shift their energy levels and link them to perform complex calculation. Neutral atom-based quantum computers are considered more stable, more scalable, have longer coherence times than other quantum approaches, and can be operated at room temperatures. China implements new K visa for young science and tech graduates. Starting October 1st, 2025, China will introduce a new visa, the K visa, designed to facilitate young science and technology talent to come to China and work. Graduates in science, technology, engineering, mathematics fields from recognized universities or research institutions, or young professionals engaged in education or research will be eligible. The visa will allow education, research, cultural exchange, entrepreneurship, business, and it signals China's openness to scientific exchange and development, even as the US clamps down on it. China cuts tariffs to zero for 53 African nations. Even as the US levies tariffs on the world, China is cutting them to zero. Most recently, China announced the extension of zero tariffs to all goods from 53 African countries that have diplomatic ties with China. Last year, China-Africa trade reached 295 billion, marking the 16th year China has remained Africa's largest trading partner. China also supports Africa through industrial capacity building. Chinese enterprises promote industrial collaborations, which are helping African nations move up the value chain. Beijing hosts humanoid robot games, showing China's prowess in the manufacture and use of humanoid robots. Beijing hosted the world's first humanoid robot games, where robots not only walk, run, and dance, but also play soccer and box. China is some of the world's most developed robot research, manufacture, and application ecosystems in the world. Scores of Chinese robot makers duked it out or showed off in track and field, in the ring, and on the performing stage with a robotic rock band that played guitar, bass, keyboards, and drums. Chinese students eat their university acceptance letters. Jilin Agricultural University has sent out acceptance letters to students made of edible paper made from mushroom mycelium developed by their research department. One happy or hungry candidate cooked his acceptance letter with chicken and mushrooms and filmed himself eating it. Other universities have sent carbon fiber admissions letters developed by the university's Advanced Composite Materials Center. Videos have emerged with students using the letter to slice watermelons and meat. The Harbin University of Technology's admission letter is engraved on material identical to the heat shield used on China's manned spacecraft. The Southern University of Science and Technology in Shenzhen delivered a Harry Potter-type letter that ignites to reveal the university's motto. As the US escalates to war with China, the propaganda against it runs thicker and more intense. In this episode, we will talk to Dana Showtyme Burton, who has lived in China for 25 years and has a unique perspective on what China is really like. Dana, welcome to the China Report.
KJ, peace and blessings, love and light. So honored to be on the show. Showtime, reporting live from Shanghai, the city of dreams, Godfather, Iron Mike.
Thank you for joining us. It's so good to have you on the show. We've been meaning to get you on this show for a while because, as I said in the intro, you have such a unique perspective on China. Among other things, you are the godfather of hip hop in China. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. I definitely feel like a proud godfather. I've been part of the community. Um, I don't think there's a foreigner or Westerner who has been, as ingrained in this hip hop community for as long as I have. There's some amazing, beautiful people that have come and gone, but for over, a quarter of a century, this has been my family, and yeah. So I've got the title and some some newspaper articles and magazines, and I kind of run with it. I'm one of the OGs of the OGs, if you will, of hip hop in China.
And you have been in China for 25 years, is that correct?
I came in 1999.
That's a long time. You,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
you must have seen a lot, and also you were originally from Motor City, Detroit. Is that correct?
that's right. Detroit
Uh,
Motown.
can you tell us a little bit what it was like, why you went to China in the first place, and what the contrasts with Motown that you have seen?
Yeah, so I was a young man, uh, finishing up university and trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I was already steeped into a study of radical politics and a community of activists where I learned from, my biggest inspirations. They wrote and spoke about China in ways that truly piqued my interest. I learned from the League of the Revolutionary Black Workers. I learned from Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party, but no one influenced me more than Malcolm X. But having this heritage, being mentored by former, Black Panther members, there was always this allure of China, and I wanted to see for myself. I grew up in an artist household, a mother that had traveled all over the world. I didn't have that much experience traveling abroad, and so when I got the opportunity, as I was finishing up school, to come to teach in China, I jumped on that opportunity, and I've been here ever since.
And that radicalization also has to do with the conditions of Detroit and the United States at the time. Is that correct?
Oh, without a question. I grew up in one of the more militant, uh, economically hard hit communities, one of the most racially polarized communities, a reputation for a lot of police corruption and violence. And this is the Dexter Davidson area of Detroit. We call it D Block. And in response to those conditions, we had a lot of organizations that sprung up, whether it was the Nation of Islam, Temple Number One, or the Black Panther Party, or the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Again, the League of the Revolutionary Black Workers, the Republic of New Africa. All of these organizations were pretty much centered in the community where I grew up, and so it impacted me greatly. An uncle that was a former Black Panther, and again, I'm 2 blocks away from a place that was called the Shrine of the Black Madonna. It was a bookstore, and just revolutionary Christian church, radical, revolutionary theology, kind of Black nationalist Christian theology, but a bookstore that sold books. Uh, of all types, where I could read Huey P. Newton and Malcolm X on and so forth.
Yeah, and we have a few of those bookstores in the East Bay of the West Coast as well. But they are a dying breed. So I'm glad to see that they were powerful and influential on your life. Coming from that background, I'm assuming that you would have a pretty good nose for oppression and social injustice. When you went to China, what was it like for you, and how did it contrast with Detroit?
Well, um, it was just it was stepping out two completely different worlds. Um, I was coming from a city that was on the verge of bankruptcy. We were coming out of a recession. This is in 1999. I think 1998 was a recession. 99, the economy was allegedly looking up. 97, I think we had the Asian financial crisis in those kind of like satellite countries, so integrated to the West. But yeah, I needed to escape, quite frankly. I needed to get out. And I knew that there has to be something more beyond what I was seeing. And I wanted to see other systems in other countries and how they functioned and worked. I was driven my whole, like most of my youth, to kind of figure out why these things were happening, the extreme poverty, the homelessness, the crime, the violence, the corruption, the inequality. And China was a system completely different, and I wanted to see how it operated with my own eyes. I read about W.E.B. Du Bois and his trip. Uh, Again, Huey P. Newton in his trip in his book Revolutionary Suicide, he talked about what he saw in China. Malcolm X didn't go to China, but he met with the Chinese ambassador in Ghana. Here's Huey P. Newton with Zhou Enlai on his trip, and Robert F. Williams. So these leaders spoke so highly of China, and I just wanted to see for myself. And I never expected in these 25 years, and I don't think most people predicted the spectacular rise and the rapid rise of China, the pace and speed of its development. But I was here for that, and I saw it with my own eyes, kind of incrementally. I didn't even notice it like happening. It's like kind of like gaining weight. You live in a place and you don't realize just how much it's changing. It's kind of just slowly growing, but when I look at the figures and the high rises compared to what I came, it's remarkable. And I actually lived through what has been, detailed as the most rapid development in human history. So it's been remarkable to see and to be part of this journey and to see how the government functions and how people engage with it and the daily lives of people, and to actually see governance working, a successful model that works for the people.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things that characterizes China's system is that they talk about results, that they really talk about that they believe they describe themselves as a whole process democracy or a performance-oriented democracy. It's the results that matter, not the performative gestures that, we are so subjected to. But I think, we all know that China has lifted 850 million people out of extreme poverty. Probably less well known is that in 1949, it had the greatest drug addiction problem in the world. One-fifth of the population was addicted to opiates, and within 3 years, they ended that problem primarily through land reform by giving people land, by giving people homes, by creating communities, by doing education, and giving people a meaningful life that they can work for. But in your 25 years, if you just kind of take a grand perspective of your time in China, what are the key things that jump out at you? You've mentioned governance, you've mentioned the development. What are some other things that were striking for you or are striking for you when you compare them to the US?
Well, you just touched on one, and it needs to be addressed because we're talking about the stark difference between where I came from and where I arrived. Um, yeah, the crisis of drug addiction and all of the problems that are related to that. That this the drug crisis in the community where I grew up. We have the I grew up in what's called the 10th precinct, and people can look this up, the 10th precinct in Detroit. And the problem was there was the police were actually involved with the drug dealing, and so they were covering up. At that time it was heroin, and then as I was like before I was born, it was heroin that had really decimated the community. And by the time I was growing up in the 80s, it was crack cocaine, and the level of violence, unspeakable violence that came with this drug trade and the destruction that it caused in our community. Um, this is something that you see immediately when you come to China. Like you don't have to deal with that. And it's not that, to be honest, when I arrived in the late 90s during the reform era, there's a stark difference between that period and what we call the new era right now, and a very marked difference after 2013. Actually, Shanghai was an extremely liberal place, and there was drug use. There was ketamine on the streets and some of the nightclubs. seeping in, and there had to be a concerted effort to kind of crack down on this. But it was clear that um, the level of corruption that it takes to allow this uh, plague to impact so many people. There's no excuse for it. It's definitely coming from the highest level of government, from the military industrial complex to how they ship it in to the local police. It can't exist without their involvement. We've always known that. And that was one of the reasons, like a lot of my mentors who were Black Panthers ended up incarcerated. They were fighting the drug traffickers, they were fighting the drug dealers, and that resulted in them ending up fighting the police. And so you don't have that fight over here. The people fighting the police and their own government. It is an all of society effort, and they're much more strict. And it just proves that these problems can be solved. They can be addressed. So I've seen them with my own eyes deal with the ketamine problem in the the late 90s to there was a brief period where there was liberal marijuana use in places like Shanghai and Beijing where there wasn't at all. Maybe around 2011, 2012, that got addressed. It got addressed in a very direct way to the point now where um, we know that it's a virtually zero drug-free zone. Like it's almost impossible to use drugs. So um, that's a big one, KJ, and because those drugs are what I believe really um, escalates any kind of like corruption or inequality. All of these things, you might be able to mitigate them a bit, but once the drugs are flooded amongst the people, they deteriorate so fast and so rapidly.
And we have had politicians who have also pointed out that this has been a deliberate strategy to destroy communities. But coming back to the drug situation and also governance in general, what are some other things that you've noticed in terms of China's administration of the quality of life for people in China?
Well, the quality of life that I live right now in a very modest middle class community, um, I'm not even sure if I can conceive of it anywhere in the United States. I'm not even sure if it exists to this extent because I've lived in the suburbs of Detroit, the quite affluent suburbs in Oakland County. This is like the third wealthiest county in the entire country. I lived on a lakefront property. I know what big homes look like, but what's different is here. Uh, One is affordable for the common person. There are parks everywhere. The streets are clean. Everyone now has direct access to the most advanced and expansive uh, transportation network on the planet, right here in Shanghai, the largest subway system in the entire world. And also, I'm connected to the largest high-speed railroad network in the world. And this is all within 5 minute walk from my door. I walk outside my house, I walk into a massive park, I walk to the subway, I walk to the train station. I live in what's called a 15-minute city. It feels like a 5 minute city, where within the 5 minute radius, you get everything that you need. Every city service, there's a community center, right outside my door. It's peaceful. Again, I said we're just surrounded by parks. There's multiple parks, really large parks. For me in Detroit, we would have to go downtown and cross a river, cross a bridge to go to one like preserved Belle Isle Park for the entire city. There's equivalent of like two or three of those parks just around my neighborhood, and just like the spectacular views that you're showing. Um, yeah, there's nothing like this in the United States of America. And then like I said, I hop on the subway if you want to go downtown and experience the nightlife. Actually, I don't need to go downtown. Like again, right in my neighborhood are world-class facilities, live houses, theaters, massive shopping malls covered with living trees, 1,000 trees, things you can't even fathom. A creek, Suzhou Creek, that probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago, was rated as one of the most polluted creeks in the world, that they found a way to clean up and also improve the air quality. So we've seen a tremendous amount of change and transformation, and for the benefit of the people. These are public goods. These are things that you walk out and don't have to pay for and enjoy. I just think about like one of my best friends. I reached out to him yesterday, and we're going to meet up. And I was looking for a place to it was Sunday, a place to hang out and listen to music. He said, "You know what? Today I'm with my girlfriend. We're just hanging out in the park." And he put a little post like the best things in life are free, and he's just hanging out under the sun and just enjoying that. So the quality of life is uncomparable. It's hard for people to imagine not walking outside and being subjected to some kind of chaos and madness at some point in your week. I had one friend, he's Chinese, he's of Taiwanese descent, but he lived in San Francisco, and he still has, a love affair with America. And he was saying, why don't you go back to America? Why don't you go back to San Francisco? And I talked about the crime and the poverty and the homelessness. And when I did go to San Francisco for the first time, I saw like some really atrocious things that happened directly in front of me. I saw drug addicts on the subway. I saw another man literally almost kill another man in the middle of the street. And he said, "Oh, it's not that bad." He said, "The drug addicts, if they come up with you, just keep $20 in your pocket. And, sometimes you just, give them the $20." He said, "I've only had to give it to him twice." And I'm thinking, you've just normalized a way of life and a system of coping that no one in the world should have to normalize and to live with.
Right, which no one should have to live with, and none of the people who are suffering from those drugs should actually have to endure. Coming back to, at first, I want to point out when you talk about a 5-minute city or a 15-minute city, that is 15 minutes walk, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I have traveled around China a little bit too, and I noticed that it's not just the large cities, but even the small cities, the lower tier cities, as they call them, still are built on this 15-minute city model. And so that there's easy access to everything that you need within a very, very short distance. And as you point out, the country is dedicated to building public wealth for everybody. In the period that, we have spent trillions of dollars on war, China has spent almost the equivalent amount on public wealth, on making their cities and their communities livable. I also note that, for example, the U.S. spends 4 times it's 4 times on the military what it does on the education budget. And on China, it's the exact opposite. China spends 4 times on its education what it spends on its military. But coming back to your experience, um, I think, one of the things I think which is a persistent myth is that African Americans and Africans are discriminated against in China. Has that been your experience?
That hasn't been my experience, and that hasn't been the experience of majority of people of color, of African descent that I know in China. Quite the opposite. Um, and for those of us long-term residents, I would say, like, the way I would describe it, I would say that racism doesn't even exist in China. And that's a bit of an exaggeration, but that I felt like that's the best way to capture the disparity between what's happening in the West and China. Whatever is happening over here, we cannot equate it to what's happening back home. You don't get that sense of feeling, sense of fear, sense of dread or degradation or humiliation. And there's no history of that legacy of violence. And so, and I thought I was the only one that, would say something like that. My friend did a documentary on blacks in China, and he interviewed dozens of people, and the majority of people actually said the exact same thing. They say racism doesn't even exist. Um, uh, in China. With that said, I mean, people are going to have different experience, and there's definitely going to be, um, your random bad apple, or someone that has bigoted ideas, and you're going to have different encounters. What I found when those encounters or situations happen, they get mitigated and addressed extremely quickly, especially if they're in social media or become public. There's an immediate response to the bad behavior. It's shunned, it's admonished, and corrective steps are made. And I've actually done a lot to debunk these stories that have made the news. And I've done some stuff on a couple of friends' channel, Danny Haifang and Carl Jha. And I still have some research that I haven't released, but I've done some really deep dives into the ways that they completely spin the narrative on what seems like something completely racist and horrible. And in reality, it's actually something that was meant to be positive, and something that there's a whole other side. Like, for example, in Wuhan, there was an exhibition, and it was actually a bunch of artists with exhibitions geared towards Africa, and it was a positive thing. Just one of them was controversial. And there's countless examples of things like this that just get blown out of context, and they don't tell you the background story on what happened.
Yeah. Dana, I have a sense of that from the other end. I mean, the first thing is I am originally from South Korea. And unfortunately, South Korea does have a long history of racial discrimination. And I would argue that that comes out of the military occupation. South Korea is militarily occupied by the United States. And most people will understand the army is a Southern institution, and it imported its prejudices into Korean society. Initially, with the Camptown prostitutes, the Camptown areas were actually Jim Crow areas that you had prostitutes who would see white GIs, and then you had prostitutes who would see GIs of color. And that culture was imported into Korean culture, which, sadly to say, is extremely racist. But from my shallow perspective, I was never able to see anything even closely approximating that in China. And I've also gotten it from the other side, where I've hosted Chinese guests in the United States, and they have a very, very hard time understanding what is going on in the United States in terms of discrimination, because it simply is not a concept that they can understand. For them, starting with the Constitution, starting with very, very basic education from kindergarten onwards, and in all levels of policy, any kind of discrimination is banned. And so when I try to explain to them that this is actually part and part of American culture, society, institutions, they have real difficulty understanding why you would do something like that, and what extraordinary waste of human talent and human capacity that is. So I get that from the other end. But following up on that experience, you're also a Muslim, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And would you say that, the trope in the United States is that Muslims are terribly oppressed in China? Is that the case?
That hasn't been my experience at all. Not even close. Like it's uh it's a bit infuriating, to be honest, because as a Muslim, I've come here and been allowed to practice my faith. There's incredible facilities, mosques. I've been a part of the Islamic community, and amongst all the Muslims that I've met, when I share the stories of our experience in the United States, there's nothing comparable. Like, I come from a community that was completely decimated by the United States government. They waged war on my community in the United States. They literally killed and murdered my Muslims and brothers that I knew, who were mentors to me. Um, One of my mentors, Jamil Alameen, H. Rap Brown, former Black Panther. He is currently incarcerated right now. and one of the imams from our community, Imam Lukman, was murdered by the FBI in cold blood and killed in the mosque. Um, in Detroit, Michigan, also Dearborn, Michigan. And so we don't have those stories. It's pretty infuriating, but for Muslims across the country, that has not been their experience. You can practice your faith freely. There are mosques everywhere. There are more mosques in China than the United States. And I've never been harassed or actually known anyone because of their faith been targeted for anything.
My understanding is that there are halal canteens everywhere in all government offices, in all schools, and just in general around the community.
Well, when I first arrived, I went to the university campus, and yeah, I was blown away. I went on to Donghua University, and the campus is a really large canteen, huge kitchen, and there was one entire section that is all halal, and young Muslims preparing the food. Um, and I wasn't sure if that was something that was common at every university, but the first university that I went to, that was the case. And then there are programs specifically designed for different ethnic groups. Some of them happen to be majority Muslim, and so these different ethnic groups they get like business development programs. So you'll see a lot of state-funded halal restaurants in the airport and in every community. I just had a friend come and visit me from Qinghai. He's part Tibetan, part Mongolian, and is very close to the border of Tibet and Xinjiang. And he eats a lot of halal food. He loves to eat that food. He was just with me the past 2 days, and for 2 days we ate at a halal Hui restaurant in Shanghai, where it's all halal food, all Islamically prepared, and there's no alcohol served.
Yeah. So China has actually a long history of uh, supporting Islam in its culture. And some of the first Western travelers to China marveled and were astonished that there were high-ranking Muslims in the Chinese imperial court. In fact, they complained about it. They complained about all the quote unquote Saracens that were holding high office because for the Western travelers, this was inconceivable. Europe had just come off a long series of crusades against the Islamic world. And so for them to see a multi-ethnic, multi-religious culture where, you saw all kinds of people in uh, different offices, I think that was hard for them to understand. The other thing I think is also important to point out is that there is Islamic Kung Fu. It's one of the three important threads of Chinese martial arts, that is to say, Taoist, Buddhist, and Islamic. And then there are four indigenous schools of Sufism inside China itself. And as you point out, the mosques everywhere. In fact, one of the oldest mosques in the world is in China. Tell us a little bit about the hip hop scene, how it developed, and what we're seeing right here.
Particularly the dance community has been so vibrant, and the dance and the b-boy community for me is actually the most inspiring and the most consistent, and I would say the most enduring and unique about Chinese hip hop. Primarily, we say that there's four key elements of hip hop. You got the dance, you got the rapping, the DJing, and graffiti art. And I was very influential in the rap scene and developing that. And my close brothers and sisters, B-boys and B-girls, I have a good friend named Wong Hong who just celebrated a birthday yesterday, who started Dragon Dancer Studio in Shanghai. And he actually has a cooperation with, a long-term cooperation with Nike, where he holds a very similar type of competition with really elaborate stages. They're bringing international judges from all across the world, and hip hop is truly flourishing in many ways in China. Very very innovative ways. The graffiti scene, the graffiti art scene. Um, So yeah, there's a lot to talk about, layers and layers of generations. And it's just been a joy to be a part of it. And this is my community and family. So I always get excited to see the development. Um, the stages. That's something that's really pretty new in the past, half a decade. These magnificent stadiums and theaters with the lights and projection screens and AI graphics and how they're integrating that with hip hop. It's really exciting. I just had a friend. They performed at the Bird's Nest the other day and filled the entire stadium up, and they have this incredible stage with the lighting on the ground. So, and Kanye West did a concert in Shanghai at one of the older stadiums with 70,000 people, but using projection screen on the ground. So, yeah, hip hop has gone to just incredible heights. I never thought that it would go this far in China.
And I think you have actually said that hip hop has a new home in China, that some of the most impressive hip hop is actually coming out of China. But I want to go back to some of the origins of the hip hop scene in China, which you were actually involved in. So let's look at the Iron Mike rap battle clip.
我不知道谁的说唱硬，谁的说唱软，我只是他妈不想输给那些群友团。我知道而不是为了他们一直在这捧我。我知道太多人都他妈根本不懂我，他们觉得押韵多就是背的，我只想那群傻逼必须跪着。
梁斌，DJ。Check it, I don't give a you know,
Oh man.
要跟我说一是一，四是四，十是十，14是14。我要告诉你们，要表达自己的意思，而不是就说那么多干嘛？每一天都在表达真的天吧。我不管你支持谁，你支持你妹，握你的大象腿，或者每一天都在醉。所以现在我很释放，我感受到了辉煌，我知道这个灯照在我的身上，我从没这么激动过。我不管结果，现在我完全沉浸在音乐中，因为我知道这个东西必须得尊重。
So, yeah, can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack. I wasn't expecting. I saw the clip and I was like, I knew the first rapper, and I was expecting him to be battling someone else. So it was a pleasant surprise to see that particular clip chosen. Man, there's a lot to talk about. This is in Wuhan, and it's in a place called the Voice of Freedom, and it was more of a rock and roll space. So a lot of rock and roll legends had their own venues and live house, and they lent a lot of hand and support to the Iron Mike. This is just really raw, underground, before lights and camera. One of those things. It's probably like one or two people that even film this. Most of these battles go off camera. This is a kind of internal community thing. And young people from across the country just getting together to express themselves in a creative, hip hop battle art form way. And you had Bebe, this young rapper he was acknowledged for being extremely talented with his freestyle and wordplay, and he was part of a camp that when hip hop really blew up, uh, you know, he got so famous. He was part of this camp, but just kind of overwhelmed by the fame, and he had his own challenges with dealing with that fame. And then Ira is someone who came in the next year on those TV shows. He's actually from Xinjiang. He's from Urumqi, and he's a Uyghur Muslim rapper, and he's actually gone on to be the most famous Uyghur rapper in all of China. And so that's just kind of the level of talent that comes up from the underground. KJ, there's just so much to talk about, and one of the things about hip hop, and one of the things about China, people struggle addressing, I think, sometimes the contradictions. Um, there's contradictions everywhere. There's a lot of contradictions in China, and they definitely need to be talked about and looked at. The problem is when you have uh, a Western media that's so obsessed and they look for any nugget, any negative thing that they can harp on. They make it really hard to talk about these things um, in an honest way. And one of the things about hip hop, my experience with hip hop, like it's really rooted me with the people. And I know their background stories, I know their struggles, and particularly through rap something like b-boy culture, a lot of the values and the spirit and the messaging, it's shown in the choreography and the dance. Whereas rap, it's much more direct. And we address real life issues, and you get to understand the real China and all of its complexity, and nothing is hidden in the rap community. And so I looked at that, and it's just so many background stories. Some of these guys are coming from hardship. Some of them, as like many young people from all across the world, trying to figure out their way, who they are, employment, what do you do? Some going down the wrong path, and some went on to be, superstars. And even in that path to superstardom, there's tons of contradiction. The same type of contradictions you see anywhere with capitalism and hyper capitalism, just being exploited for the wrong reasons. Um, just feelings of alienation from your work. And so all this is running through my head as I'm watching it. But this was 25 years of labor of love, continuously throwing these kind of events, sometimes upwards of 60 cities in a year, all across China, and getting to meet and know the people, um, yeah, from the bottom up.
So you've seen China in all of its aspects, the good, the bad, the ugly. You've been to 60 different cities. You've been there for 25 years. So you have a pretty good view of China. And at the same time, in the United States, we are subjected to endless propaganda about China. We're given a whole set of, predetermined views around China. What are some of the key lies that the American public is told?
That's a really good question, KJ. Like if you could make a top 10 list. One of my friends, he just put out a book. He's an amazing journalist, Andy Borum. He just has a book. I think it's the top 10, top 20 myths or misconceptions about China. But for me, I found that the list is just never ending. It doesn't stop when it comes to the propagandists. I couldn't even rank them because um, they just have this way to just take anything, and a lot of times they're really good in they found a way to just lies of omission, lies of distortion, and to be so deceptive to the point where it's really the propaganda. It's not, maybe it's not necessarily lie, but it's more of like emotional manipulation to the point where they don't even have to tell a narrative anymore. They don't even have to say a story. They just say a name. I think someone pointed out the three T's: Taiwan, Tiananmen, and Tibet. And for decades, they would just say any of those three. You don't even have to say anything. You just say China and Tibet, China and Taiwan. And people immediately have been programmed to see some visuals, some images, and some stories, and they immediately, think of what they've been told, and that's the end of the conversation. It's just equals China bad, China oppressive, and I really believe that's how it functions. More so catching them in the big lie, but there's tons of them, and it's just endless. And there's just a whole system of manipulation. I think that uh, the thing that I'm learning to identify is just catch the emotional manipulation. Because I find when you try to have a conversation, an intelligent, long conversation about these topics, the propagandists run for the hills. They do not want to talk about it. They don't want to get into the nuance because the jig is up. They expose the entire scam. The whole scam is to pull at your heartstrings. It's to get you in an emotional state, and it's really to drive you crazy. It's to drive you crazy. It's to drive you insane. To get you erratic, and to be in a really toxic, negative mindset that is hopeless. That China is cannot be trusted, and it's doomed for failure. And if you try to suggest any kind of positive or even not even necessarily positive, you just balanced, a more balanced critical assessment where you're looking at multiple sides and angles, that's out the window. Everything is a foregone conclusion. China's bad. They're the enemy. Let's destroy them. Really, what they're trying to do. And so that kind of messaging, I think, gets at the core of all of their lies.
I agree. I agree absolutely. And I have often referred to it. You've said the three T's. I've also mentioned the four D's. That is, the Chinese are dirty, disgusting, deceitful, dishonest, and dangerous or deadly. So all of these kind of are very emotional appeals, as you point out. And I think these emotional appeals are also very, very effective because it allows the West to disown its own guilt about the global injustices it has perpetrated and then to project them onto the other. For example, they were saying that, there was slavery in the cotton farms in Xinjiang. Well, there is a country which has used slavery in cotton to develop its economy. It's certainly not Xinjiang, but we know who that is. Same thing, there's a country that has systematically waged war against Islam and Islamic cultures, not simply for the past few decades, but actually for centuries. And so these kinds of projections are very, very easy to for people to glom onto because they allow you to disown your own occluded guilt. And, we always say on this show, the accusation is a confession. So
Mm.
I think these are all really important insights that you're sharing with us, but
If I could
ultimately,
add, if I'm
Mhm.
sorry,
Go
KJ, not to
ahead,
cut you.
please.
If I could just add on that point, because you really touched on something. Uh, that strategy of deflection, I don't know what's the precise term for this technique, but you're absolutely right. I think that's one of the uh, uh, most disgusting and vile techniques that they're using, but it's working because, uh, another example is in the case of Xinjiang. You will have a progressive community in the United States fighting with our government, telling our government that there's a genocide taking place in one part of the world. People are dying. There's a genocide happening. And they'll look at you and say, no, that's not a genocide. Those are our allies. What you're seeing is not happening. Here in China, there's a genocide. Genocide's happening here. We're going to pass some legislation against this genocide. If you're worried about genocide, uh, you can't talk about genocide there without talking, looking at this. Sign this paperwork, sign this legislation, pass this through Congress, and it works. They pass it, they believe it, they feed into it, and then they totally get distracted about what they were focusing on. And no legislation is passed and nothing is done. And they do it all the time, this kind of bait and switch. And really it's a form of projection. And uh, it's the type of method that a street criminal would do. The most narcissistic, vile street criminal will make you feel guilty as a victim, and he'll project his crimes off to someone else and laugh while he's, stabbing you in the back. So it's that really sick, sadistic, criminal nature that we're seeing coming out with this kind of deflection. And I think those tactics really need to be called out and addressed.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, Dana, just in closing, not to be blindingly, obvious, but, why do you care? I mean, you have a pretty good life in China. Why are you sticking your neck out, fighting these types of battles? Why do you care? Why are you speaking out?
Well, I've always had a concern. but my position really changed uh, right around 2016, and it wasn't particularly because of who was in the administration. This was something that was consistently building up across administrations, but there were certain things that clicked to me and became apparent just how extreme we've gone and how far we're moving and how dangerous the situation is, to the point where even putting myself at risk, putting my career at jeopardy, getting the backlash and hate. Um, it's incumbent that I speak out because lives are at jeopardy, lives are at stake. I truly believe we are moving towards war with China, and it's only gotten worse in the past 12 years. It's just getting increasingly close. At that time in 2016, I know that Jeffrey Sachs talks about this doomsday clock and how the clock gets closer to nuclear war. I wasn't even aware of that clock, but because of where I was in a very remote location in China at that time in 2016, I thought I had found the most peaceful, safe place on the planet, the most beautiful place that you can find. And then I started to see the news reports, some really obscure news reports. This idea that nuclear defense weapons were being put into place right in the region where I was. And then I realized that the most remote places in China are probably going to be the first places that are going to get hit by a nuclear strike, and that I was the target. I literally was in a place where I would be the target of the U.S. government and their nuclear strike, and that's what woke me up to just how serious and how close we are to war with the United States.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I believe that we're very, very close. I believe we're right on the precipice of war. The US has actually calendared dates, and I think it's very clear from reading the Washington papers that are distributed in Washington that nuclear strikes are very, very much part of the game plan. So
And I was right. I was very close to North Korea, so it gives you a concept of what we're dealing with.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So these are very, very high stakes. This is a very high stake moment. And at the same time, I salute and admire all the great work that you have been done. And I hope you'll be willing to join us back on the show for a future discussion where we can get more into these topics. Thank you so much, Dana.
KJ, I want to thank you and send that support and admiration right back at you because it's incumbent that we inspire a new generation and we give them the tools and information that they need. And what you've done is deeply inspiring. I've learned a lot from you and your show, and I just want to thank you for doing your work and encourage you to move forward. Thank you for having me on the show, and I look forward to coming back and maybe get into some nuance in some of these topics.
Thank you, Dana.